I'm Lisa Morgan, 32, and I've always been the responsible older sister to Rebecca. We were inseparable growing up, sharing dreams and secrets. When she got engaged, I was thrilled to be her maid of honor. I invested thousands of dollars, countless hours, and all my heart into planning her perfect day. But family dynamics are complicated, especially with my mother Deborah calling the shots. I never imagined the day she'd look me in the eyes and say those crushing words. If you're watching from somewhere dealing with family drama, drop a comment below, hit like and subscribe, because this story might just give you the strength you need. Growing up as Rebecca's older sister meant I often took on the role of her protector and guide. From teaching her to tie her shoes to helping her navigate high school drama, I was the constant in her life she could always count on. Our mother, Deborah, never tried to hide her favoritism. Rebecca was the golden child with her artistic talents and bubbly personality, while I was the practical one who needed to lighten up. My father Thomas existed in the periphery of our family dynamics, choosing peace over confrontation whenever Mom's behavior crossed lines. As the responsible eldest child, I became the family's problem solver by default. When the roof leaked, I arranged for repairs. When bills piled up, I quietly covered the shortfalls from my savings. This pattern continued into our adult years, with me supporting Rebecca financially through her art history degree when our parents' contributions fell short. My own path led me to become a financial consultant at a prestigious firm in Boston. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I managed multi-million-dollar portfolios for clients, I was still expected to manage my family's finances too. I didn't mind, though. Helping Rebecca achieve her dreams gave me genuine joy. When Rebecca met James Wilson at an art gallery opening 3 years ago, I knew instantly they were perfect for each other. James came from a wealthy family but wasn't flashy about it. He valued Rebecca's artistic perspective and supported her career ambitions. Their engagement after 2 years of dating surprised no one, and I was the first person Rebecca called, screaming with excitement through the phone. "Lisa, he proposed. You're going to be my maid of honor, right? I can't do this without you." Her voice bubbled with happiness that December morning. "Of course I will," I promised, already mentally planning how I could help make her wedding dreams come true. The initial planning stages were exactly what I'd imagined. Rebecca and I spent weekends browsing venues, discussing color schemes, and creating Pinterest boards full of inspiration. I took detailed notes during every conversation, wanting to ensure her vision became reality. My apartment slowly filled with bridal magazines and fabric swatches. The first sign of trouble came during what should have been a routine family dinner to discuss wedding budgets. Mom arrived with a leather-bound wedding planner I'd never seen before. "I've already put deposits down on the Clayton Hotel," she announced before anyone had even served their salad. "They only had one date available this summer, so I snatched it up." Rebecca looked surprised but pleased. "Mom, that's so generous. But Lisa and I were still comparing venues." "Darling, the Clayton books up a year in advance. We're lucky they had a cancellation." Mom patted Rebecca's hand while shooting me a triumphant glance. "Besides, I've always imagined your wedding there." That was the first of many decisions made without consultation. Within weeks, Mom had essentially taken over, transforming from occasional participant to wedding dictator. Vendors I'd researched were dismissed in favor of her friends' recommendations. The color scheme Rebecca and I had settled on was suddenly too drab. "It's fine," Rebecca assured me when I expressed concern. "Mom's really enjoying this, and it makes planning easier. Plus, she and Dad are contributing a lot financially." I bit my tongue and stepped back, still helping where I could but increasingly feeling like an outsider looking in. That feeling intensified when my cousin Megan started appearing in planning photos on social media. Megan had always orbited our family events with a particular interest in being part of the inner circle. Now she was suddenly accompanying Rebecca and Mom to vendor meetings I hadn't been invited to. In one Instagram photo, she was holding color swatches against bridesmaid dress options, a task I thought would be mine as maid of honor. Rebecca seems closer to Megan these days, I mentioned casually to my boyfriend Tyler one evening as I scrolled through yet another photo of them at a cake tasting. Maybe it's just because Megan has more free time, Tyler suggested, always the voice of reason. You've been slammed at work this quarter. I nodded, pushing down the nagging worry that something more significant was happening. After all, Rebecca and I had been each other's constants for 30 years. A few weeks of wedding planning couldn't change that, could it? But as spring progressed, the invitations to planning events stopped coming altogether. When I called Rebecca to check in, her responses became increasingly vague and rushed. The detailed discussions about centerpieces and music selections were replaced with quick texts. Mom's handling it, or already figured it out. Meanwhile, I was still financially contributing to elements of the wedding, paying the deposit for the photographer Rebecca loved, but Mom thought was too expensive, ordering custom welcome baskets for out-of-town guests, and secretly arranging what I hoped would be the perfect wedding gift, a luxury honeymoon to Bali, complete with first-class flights and a private villa with ocean views. I told myself everything would return to normal after the wedding. This was just a stressful time, and soon my sister and I would laugh about Mom's wedding takeover over wine in her new married apartment. I didn't realize then how wrong I was, or how quickly the situation would deteriorate beyond what I ever thought possible. The day I discovered I wasn't invited to Rebecca's wedding dress shopping was like a punch to the chest. I found out through an innocent question from my coworker Natalie, who happened to be friends with the boutique owner. How was Rebecca's appointment yesterday? Sandra mentioned your sister found the one right away. I froze, coffee cup halfway to my lips. What appointment? Natalie's expression shifted from excited to uncomfortable. Oh, at Elegant Moments? Sandra said your mom, sister, and cousin had champagne and spent hours there. I just assumed you were there too. I mumbled something about a last-minute work emergency and escaped to the bathroom, where I stared at my reflection and tried to make sense of being excluded from such an important moment. Rebecca and I had talked about wedding dress shopping. Since we were teenagers, pretending pillowcases were veils and making promises about being there for each other's special moments. I called Rebecca that evening, my voice carefully controlled. How was dress shopping? A pause. Oh, it just happened really fast. Mom had an appointment, and it wasn't supposed to be the actual shopping day, just a preliminary look. With Megan? Another pause. She was free, and we needed a third opinion. I could have made myself free, I said quietly. You could have asked. Lisa, don't make this a big deal. There will be plenty of other wedding stuff you can be part of. But the other wedding stuff never materialized. The bridal shower was organized without my input, though I was asked to contribute financially to the venue. The bachelorette party. Planning was taken over by Megan, who chose a destination I knew Rebecca wouldn't truly enjoy. When I offered suggestions based on 30 years of knowing my sister, they were dismissed as not what Rebecca wants anymore. Still, I continued to support from the shadows. I finalized the honeymoon arrangements, spending $8,600 on first-class flights, luxury accommodations, and special experiences I knew the couple would love. I imagined Rebecca's face when I presented her with the surprise at the rehearsal dinner, pictured the hug and the return of our sisterly bond. Meanwhile, the distance between us grew. Rebecca began declining our traditional Sunday brunches, always with a different excuse. When we did speak, our conversations felt scripted and shallow, nothing like the deep talks we'd always shared. Is everything okay between us? I finally asked directly after 3 weeks of increasingly sporadic communication. Everything's fine. I'm just super busy with wedding stuff, she replied, not quite meeting my eyes. Mom's been amazing handling all the details. At a family gathering in May, just 2 months before the wedding, I overheard a conversation that made my blood run cold. I had stepped into the kitchen to refill my water glass when I heard my name from the adjacent dining room. Lisa's always been difficult, my mother's voice carried clearly. Rebecca's finally seeing it now. Always has to control everything, make everything about her accomplishments. It must be hard for Rebecca, Megan responded, voice dripping with fake sympathy, especially during her wedding when she should be the center of attention. Exactly. That's why we've had to minimize her involvement. For Rebecca's sake. I stood frozen, water overflowing my glass as their words sank in. My own mother was actively working to exclude me from my sister's wedding, painting me as some sort of attention-seeking monster to anyone who would listen. That night, I broke down to Tyler, finally voicing the fears I'd been suppressing for months. What if they don't even want me at the wedding anymore? What if all this distancing is leading to something worse? Tyler pulled me close, his steady presence a contrast to my shaking hands. That's not possible. You're Rebecca's sister, and you've done nothing but support her. But what if Mom has convinced her otherwise? You don't know how persuasive she can be, how she twists things. Then you need to talk to Rebecca directly, Tyler said firmly. No more guessing, no more hoping it will get better on its own. You need to have a real conversation about what's happening. He was right. The situation had deteriorated too far for passive acceptance. I texted Rebecca the next morning. Need to talk about the wedding and our relationship. Can we meet tomorrow? Her response came hours later. Really busy with wedding stuff. Come to Mom and Dad's on Thursday at 7. We can talk then. Those 5 days were among the longest of my life. I rehearsed what I would say, how I would calmly express my hurt without accusation. I reminded myself that Rebecca might be caught in the middle, pressured by our mother's strong personality. I arrived at our parents' house Thursday evening with a heart full of hope for reconciliation and clarity. I had no idea I was walking into an ambush that would shatter my relationship with my family and force me to redefine what loyalty and self-respect truly meant. The evening air felt unusually still as I parked outside my parents' colonial-style home that Thursday. The familiar driveway where Rebecca and I had played hopscotch as kids now felt like foreign territory. I checked my reflection in the rear-view mirror, straightened my blouse, and took a deep breath before heading to the front door. Mom answered before I could even ring the bell, her expression unreadable. "We're in the living room," she said curtly, turning without waiting for my response. The scene inside felt staged. Dad sat in his usual armchair, looking uncomfortable and slightly gray. Rebecca perched on the edge of the sofa, eyes down, fingers twisting in her lap. Mom positioned herself standing behind Rebecca, one hand on the sofa back in what looked like a protective stance. And there, in what had always been my spot during family discussions, sat Megan, looking simultaneously smug and concerned. "What's going on?" I asked, remaining standing when no one offered me a seat. "Rebecca," I thought, "we were going to talk about the wedding." "That's why we're all here," Mom interjected before Rebecca could speak. "There's something you need to understand about the wedding." A strange stillness settled over me, a calm before a storm I could feel approaching. "We've been discussing things," Mom continued, her voice taking on the patronizing tone she'd perfected over decades. "As a family. And we all agreed that your involvement in the wedding has become problematic." "Problematic?" I echoed, looking directly at Rebecca, who still wouldn't meet my gaze. "Your controlling behavior, your need to make everything about yourself," Mom said, ticking off points on her fingers like items on a grocery list. "The way you've tried to overshadow Rebecca's special time with your opinions and your financial contributions." I felt as though I'd stepped into an alternate reality. "Rebecca?" I prompted, desperate for my sister to speak for herself. She finally looked up, her expression a mixture of guilt and rehearsed resolve. "It's just been really stressful, Lisa. Every time you get involved, there's tension. Mom thinks, Mom thinks, I repeated softly. What do you think, Rebecca?" Before she could answer, Mom stepped forward, placing herself partially between us. "What Rebecca thinks is that her wedding should be a happy occasion. And frankly, your presence would make that impossible." The room seemed to tilt slightly as her words registered. "My presence at the planning, you mean?" Mom's lips curved into what can only be described as a smirk, satisfaction gleaming in her eyes at finally delivering the blow she'd been orchestrating for months. "We all agreed. You're not welcome at the wedding," she said, enunciating each word like she was savoring a fine wine. "Not as maid of honor, not as a bridesmaid, not as a guest. It's better for everyone this way." The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the antique clock on the mantel ticking, marking seconds in a moment that felt endless. Dad shifted in his chair but said nothing. Megan had the decency to look at the floor, and Rebecca, my sister, my best friend since her first breath, sat in complicit silence, effectively ending 30 years of sisterhood. "I see," I said finally, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. "And when was this decision made?" "We've been moving this direction for months," Mom replied, clearly pleased by my calm reaction, mistaking shock for acceptance. "Rebecca asked Megan to be her maid of honor weeks ago. We just needed to make it official." I turned to Megan, who now met my gaze with a challenging look. "Congratulations," I said flatly. "It's nothing personal," she replied, the lie transparent. Almost laughed at the absurdity. Nothing personal about replacing me in my sister's wedding, in my sister's life. "Rebecca?" I tried one more time. "Is this really what you want?" Mom answered again. "Rebecca wants a drama-free wedding. You've always been too controlling, too opinionated. Everything has to be your way. The venue wasn't good enough. The caterer wasn't up to your standards." "That's not true, and you know it," I interrupted, feeling the first crack in my composed facade. "I've supported every decision, even when I wasn't consulted. I've contributed thousands of dollars without being asked. See, there it is," Mom pointed accusingly, "throwing your money in our faces, using your financial contributions to control the wedding. That's exactly why you can't be there." I looked at my father, silently pleading for him to say something, anything. He met my eyes briefly, then looked away, his lifelong pattern of avoiding conflict winning out even now. A strange calm settled over me then, a clarity cutting through the hurt and confusion. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't something that could be fixed with a heart-to-heart. This was a carefully orchestrated exclusion, months in the making. "Good to know," I said simply. I turned and walked toward the door, my movements mechanical. Behind me, I heard Rebecca call my name once, softly, but no footsteps followed. No one tried to stop me. The drive home passed in a blur. Streetlights smeared like watercolors as unexpected tears filled my eyes. I pulled over twice when the road became too blurry to navigate safely. My phone buzzed repeatedly with incoming texts, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them. When I finally reached my apartment, Tyler was waiting, his face full of hopeful expectation that crumbled the moment he saw me. "What happened?" he asked, immediately pulling me into a hug. The whole story poured out in disjointed fragments between sobs, the ambush, Mom's cruel smirk, Rebecca's betrayal, Dad's silence, Megan's triumph. "They can't do this," Tyler said when I finished, outrage clear in his voice. "You're her sister. You've done nothing but support her." "Apparently that doesn't matter," I whispered, emotional exhaustion beginning to set in. "Mom's been working on this for months, turning Rebecca against me, making me out to be some kind of villain." "What are you going to do?" Tyler asked, his hand warm against mine. I stared out the window at the city lights below, feeling hollow, yet somehow lighter, as if the worst had happened, and now I could begin to rebuild. I don't know yet, I admitted, but I know I deserve better than this. All of this. What I didn't realize then was that the confrontation that evening wasn't the end of the story. It was merely the setup for what would come next. Both the depths of betrayal and the unexpected path to healing that would follow in the coming days. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake replaying the scene at my parents' house, analyzing every word, every look, searching for something I might have misunderstood or misinterpreted. But the memory of my mother's satisfied smirk as she delivered, her verdict left no room for ambiguity. By 4 a.m., I'd given up on sleep entirely. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold beside me, I began to catalog all I had contributed to Rebecca's wedding. The photographer deposit, $2,500. Custom welcome baskets for out-of-town guests, $1,800. The string quartet I'd arranged as a surprise for the ceremony, $1,200. The list grew longer as I remembered smaller expenses, the vintage hairpin I'd found that matched Rebecca's grandmother's earrings, the calligrapher I'd hired for the place cards after Rebecca mentioned loving hand lettering, and then the honeymoon. The crown jewel of my gifts to my sister and James. First-class flights to Bali, $4,200. The private villa with ocean views, $3,800. The special experiences I'd arranged, private cooking class, sunset cruise, guided trek to hidden waterfalls, $600 all told. I'd contributed over $15,000 to a wedding I was now banned from attending. The first light of dawn was breaking when I made my decision. I opened my laptop and navigated to my banking app. With steady fingers, I transferred the $8,600 honeymoon fund back to my personal account. Next, I logged into the airline and resort websites, methodically canceling each reservation. I sent a brief professional email to the travel agent handling the special experiences, explaining that the plans had changed. My phone had been buzzing intermittently throughout the night with incoming texts and calls, but I hadn't looked at it. Now I checked the notifications. 3 missed calls from Rebecca, 12 from Mom, even one from Dad, which was unusual. There were multiple texts, most from Mom, ranging from defensive, "You're making this all about you again," to accusatory, "After everything we've done for you." Nothing that indicated remorse or reconsideration. I made one last call to my credit card company. "I need to report some unauthorized charges," I explained to the representative. "Family members have been making purchases without my permission." It wasn't entirely accurate, but it wasn't entirely untrue either. I'd never explicitly authorized my mother to use my card information for the additional wedding favors she'd ordered last month, or the upgraded linens she'd insisted upon. By 7 a.m., I'd methodically untangled my financial ties to Rebecca's wedding. I sent a brief email to my boss explaining I needed a personal day, then turned off my phone completely. The sudden silence felt both terrifying and liberating. I spent the morning walking through the public gardens, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. The betrayal felt physical, an actual ache beneath my ribs that intensified with each breath. Rebecca and I had shared everything for 30 years. Secrets, dreams, sorrows, celebrations. How could she sit silently while Mom banished me from her wedding? How could she replace me with Megan of all people? Around noon, I met my best friend Olivia for lunch. I hadn't planned to tell her everything, but one look at my face and she knew something was catastrophically wrong. "They did what?" she exclaimed when I finished explaining, loud enough that neighboring tables turned to look. "Your own mother said that to your face?" I nodded, pushing salad around my plate without eating. And Rebecca just sat there? Said nothing? Olivia's outrage was validating after hours of self-doubt. She tried to speak once or twice, but Mom kept interrupting, and she didn't stop any of it, so I trailed off, the hurt still too raw to articulate fully. Olivia reached for my hand across the table. Lisa, there's something you should know. I didn't tell you before because I didn't want to upset you, but now I think you need to hear it. My stomach tightened. What is it? Your mom has been saying things about you for months now. Olivia looked uncomfortable. At Rebecca's engagement party, she told my mother that you were jealous of Rebecca's happiness. And at the Williams dinner party last month, she mentioned how concerned everyone was about your fragile emotional state, and how the family was walking on eggshells around you. I stared at her, stunned. What? Why would she say that? Don't know. But she's been planting these little seeds with everyone in your social circle. Small comments, concerned looks, nothing direct enough to seem malicious, just enough to create this impression that you're unstable somehow. Difficult. Olivia squeezed my hand. I shut it down whenever I heard it, but I'm not everywhere. My mother's voice echoed in my memory. Your controlling behavior, your need to make everything about yourself. She hadn't just been turning Rebecca against me. She'd been systematically undermining me with everyone we knew. But why? I whispered, more to myself than to Olivia. What does she gain from this? Control, Olivia said simply. You're successful, independent, financially stable. You have what she never did. My mom always said your mother seemed jealous of you, even when we were kids. The pieces began to align in a new pattern, illuminating decades of small cruelties and manipulations I'd normalized or excused. The times Mom had forgotten to tell me about family events. The backhanded compliments about my career. It's amazing. You've done so well without a husband to support you. The way she subtly reminded Rebecca of every childhood slight while glossing over all I'd done to support and protect my sister. I've been so blind, I said finally. You've been a daughter who wanted to believe the best about her mother, Olivia corrected gently. That's not blindness. That's love. By the time I returned home that afternoon, I felt different, still hurt, but clearer about what was happening and what I needed to do. I turned my phone back on and watched as notifications flooded in. 28 missed calls in total. Voicemails ranging from my mother's cold fury to my father's uncomfortable attempts at peacemaking. And one message from Rebecca, sent at 3:42 a.m. that changed everything. I'm so sorry, Lisa. Mom's been lying to me about you for months. James and I just found out what she did with the honeymoon reservations. Please call me, please. I need my sister back. I stared at Rebecca's message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the call button without pressing it. The raw emotion in her text felt genuine, but after months of manipulation and yesterday's brutal confrontation, I wasn't ready to dive back into the chaos without understanding more. The other messages painted a picture of family implosion. Mom's voicemails evolved from righteously indignant, "How dare you cancel the honeymoon after promising it as a gift?" to threatening, "You've left me no choice but to tell everyone about your behavior," to an unconvincing attempt at reconciliation. "We can still fix this if you apologize." Dad's messages were fewer and more subdued. "Your mother is very upset," he said in one, background noise suggesting he was calling from his car to avoid being overheard. "I didn't know about any of this until yesterday. Please call when you can." Other family members had begun weighing in too. My Uncle Robert, always Mom's ally, left a stern lecture about respecting parents. My grandmother asked in her wavering voice if I was feeling all right, clearly having received Mom's version of events. But there were unexpected supporters too. Aunt Catherine, who rarely involved herself in family drama, left a surprisingly forceful message. "I've watched your mother do this before, Lisa. She did the same to me with your father. Call me, we need to talk." I decided to start there, calling my father's sister back first. "Oh, Lisa." Aunt Catherine's warm voice filled the line immediately. "I've been so worried. Are you all right?" "Not really," I admitted. "I don't understand. What's happening, Aunt Kath? Why would Mom do this?" Because you threaten her, she said simply. You always have since you were little. So capable, so independent. Deborah needs to be needed to control everything. When that's challenged, she reacts. By turning my sister against me? By banning me from the wedding? It's what she does. Catherine sighed. She did the same to me when I was your age. Your father and I were always close. But when he met Deborah, things changed. She created conflicts that didn't exist, told your father I'd said terrible things about her. By their wedding, I wasn't welcome either. I sat down heavily, processing this revelation. Dad never told me that. Thomas has always chosen peace over confrontation, especially with your mother. We eventually reconciled, but only years later, and never like before. Her voice softened. But this isn't about old history. This is about stopping the pattern now, before your relationship with Rebecca is permanently damaged. After speaking with Catherine, I called my best friend from college, Andrea, who worked as a therapist. Without breaking confidentiality, she helped me understand the dynamics at play. Narcissistic patterns, triangulation, the golden child, scapegoat dynamic that had shaped my relationship with Rebecca since childhood. The most important thing, Andrea emphasized, is protecting your own boundaries while leaving room for Rebecca to find her way back. She's been manipulated too, remember? I was still processing this advice when my phone rang again. James, Rebecca's fiancé. Lisa, he sounded genuinely distressed. Thank God you answered. It's been chaos here. Rebecca's been crying for hours. What happened, James? I kept my voice neutral, not ready to extend trust. We found out what your mother's been doing. The lies she's been telling, the emails she altered. Lisa, Rebecca never knew you were excluded from dress shopping. Your mom told her you couldn't make it, showed her texts from you canceling. What? I never sent any texts. We know that now. Your mother apparently created fake conversations to show Rebecca, making it look like you were too busy or didn't care about wedding activities. His voice hardened. When we confronted her, she admitted to changing the names in the contact list on Rebecca's phone too, rerouting some of your texts to her own phone. The level of deliberate manipulation was staggering. But yesterday, at the house, Rebecca thought that meeting was to reconcile things. Your mother told her you'd been saying horrible things about the wedding, that you needed to hear how hurt everyone was. She never expected what actually happened. My head was spinning. Why is she telling me this through you? Because she's terrified you'll never speak to her again. And because... He hesitated. Your mother showed up at our apartment last night after you left. She was not well. Screaming about ungrateful children, demanding we choose sides. It got bad enough that neighbors called building security. The situation was spiraling faster than I could process. I need to think, James. This is all too much. I understand. Just don't shut the door completely, okay? Rebecca loves you. She's been manipulated too. I promised nothing but said I'd be in touch soon. I barely had time to absorb this conversation before my work phone rang. It was Sandra, our office receptionist. Lisa, I hate to bother you on your day off, but there's a situation here. Your mother arrived about 20 minutes ago demanding to see you. When I explained you weren't in, she's causing quite a scene in the lobby. My professional and personal worlds were colliding in the worst possible way. What is she doing exactly? Making accusations? Telling anyone who'll listen that you've stolen money from her? That you're experiencing some kind of breakdown? Sandra lowered her voice. Mr. Daniels is trying to handle it, but she's becoming increasingly erratic. I'll be right there, I said, grabbing my keys. The 15-minute drive to my office felt like entering a battle zone. Mom had never visited my workplace before, had shown minimal interest in my career beyond how it benefited the family financially. Now she was there, deliberately targeting the professional reputation I'd spent years building. I arrived to find security escorting my mother from the building, her voice carrying across the lobby. "You don't know what she's capable of. She's always been troubled." The embarrassment was acute, burning across my face as colleagues watched the scene unfold. Mr. Daniels, my direct supervisor, approached with concern. "Lisa, take whatever time you need to handle this personal matter," he said quietly. "Your work speaks for itself. No one here is paying attention to unfounded accusations." His support should have been comforting, but the public spectacle left me feeling exposed and violated. This wasn't just about a wedding anymore. Mom was actively trying to destroy the foundations of my life, my reputation, my relationships, my career. As security guided my mother to the parking lot, her eyes locked with mine across the lobby. Instead of the remorse or shame one might expect, I saw only cold fury and something worse: satisfaction at having disrupted my carefully ordered world. In that moment, something shifted within me. The hurt child seeking maternal approval disappeared, replaced by a clear-eyed adult who could finally see the pattern of manipulation for what it was. This wasn't love. This wasn't family. This was abuse, and it had gone on long enough. I returned to my apartment and made a decision. It was time to address this situation once and for all, not with emotional reactions, but with calm, irrefutable truth. I would meet with Rebecca, and anyone else involved, to lay out exactly what had happened and establish boundaries that would protect my well-being going forward. Whether those boundaries included attending the wedding, or even maintaining. Contact with my mother remained to be seen. But for the first time, I understood that I deserved better treatment than I'd received, and I was prepared to demand it. 2 days later, I sat at a corner table in a neutral location, a quiet cafe halfway between my apartment and Rebecca's. I'd arrived early to settle my nerves, arranging printed evidence in a folder beside me. Screenshots of original texts that contradicted Mom's fabricated ones, email confirmations of wedding arrangements I'd made, bank statements showing my financial contributions. Rebecca arrived alone, looking smaller somehow, her usual confidence diminished. Dark circles beneath her eyes matched my own. "Thank you for coming," she said softly, sliding into the chair opposite me. "James isn't joining us?" I asked, having expected him after our phone conversation. "He's parking the car. I wanted a few minutes with just you first." Her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her purse beside her. "Lisa, I don't even know where to begin." I waited, giving her space to find her words. This wasn't how I'd pictured our first conversation after the confrontation, but nothing about this situation had followed expected patterns. "I believed her," Rebecca finally said, voice breaking. "All these months, Mom has been showing me texts from you, canceling plans, telling me you thought my wedding choices were tacky, that you were too busy with your important career to be bothered with wedding details." Tears spilled onto her cheeks. I believed her because it was easier than thinking my mother would lie so completely, so deliberately. "She showed you fake texts?" I asked, still struggling to comprehend the extent of the deception. Rebecca nodded, pulling out her phone. "James figured it out. Look at this." She showed me her messaging app, scrolling to conversations with me. Except they weren't my words at all. Messages dismissing wedding plans, complaining about costs, making snide remarks about her choices. All attributed to my number, but written in a voice nothing like mine. Mom had access to my phone. She created a contact with her number but your name. When I thought I was texting you, I was actually texting her. Then she'd respond pretending to be you. Rebecca wiped her eyes. And she deleted real messages from you. I never received half the things you sent me. The methodical nature of the deception was staggering. But what about when we saw each other in person? Surely you could tell something was off. We barely saw each other these past few months. Mom always had an excuse for why you couldn't make it to wedding events. And when we did meet, she was always there, controlling the conversation, interpreting everything you said in the worst possible light afterward. Rebecca looked up as James approached the table. She poisoned everything. James set down 3 coffees before taking a seat beside Rebecca. Lisa, I'm so sorry. I should have seen what was happening sooner. How did you figure it out? I asked. The honeymoon cancellation was the tipping point, James explained. When Rebecca got the notification, she was confused because she didn't even know about the Bali trip. Your mother claimed you had promised this elaborate honeymoon but canceled it vindictively after being rightly excluded from the wedding. But that made no sense, Rebecca interjected. Why would you spend thousands on a honeymoon for us if you were as resentful as Mom claimed? So we started investigating, checking her phone records, comparing timestamps of messages. James continued. Once we started looking for inconsistencies, the whole fabrication fell apart. The final proof came when we found a folder on your mother's tablet. She'd actually been keeping screenshots of fake conversations she created, probably to keep her stories straight. I pushed my folder across the table. I brought my own evidence, bank transfers, original emails, everything. As Rebecca and James reviewed the documents, their expressions shifted from shock to horror to indignation. The contrast between my actual words and actions versus what my mother had portrayed couldn't have been starker. That day, at your parents' house, James said. Rebecca thought we were meeting to clear the air about miscommunications. She had no idea your mother was planning to ban you from the wedding. I froze, Rebecca admitted, shame evident in her voice. When Mom started saying those terrible things, claiming we'd all agreed, I was in shock. By the time I processed what was happening, you were already gone. Her hand reached for mine across the table. Lisa, I never agreed to exclude you from my wedding. Never. You're my sister, my best friend. I can't get married without you there. The validation of my experience brought a rush of emotion I hadn't expected. For months, I'd been gaslit into questioning my own perceptions, my own worth, in my family. We need to talk about Mom, I said, once I could trust my voice again. This isn't normal behavior. This is deliberate, calculated manipulation. It gets worse, James said grimly. After you left that night, Rebecca confronted your mother. The things she said, the venom, it was like watching someone transform into a different person. Rebecca nodded. She admitted to everything, but with no remorse. She said she was protecting me from your negative influence. When I said I wanted you back in the wedding, she threatened to withdraw all financial support and tell everyone in the family I was having a pre-wedding breakdown. Just like what she's been saying about me, I murmured. Exactly, James confirmed. It's a pattern she uses to discredit anyone who challenges her. We spent the next hour mapping out the full extent of my mother's manipulation. The altered texts, the diverted invitations, the rumors spread throughout, our social circle, the financial control. Each revelation built upon the last, creating a comprehensive picture of calculated emotional abuse spanning decades. I've arranged a meeting, I finally said, with Dad, Aunt Catherine, and a few other family members who need to hear the truth. A neutral family intervention of sorts. When? Rebecca asked. Tomorrow evening. Will you come? She nodded without hesitation. Of course. It's time everyone knew the truth. The family meeting the following evening was both difficult and necessary. We gathered in Aunt Catherine's living room, myself, Rebecca, and James, Dad, Aunt Catherine and Uncle Paul, and our maternal grandmother Martha, who had specifically asked to be included after receiving concerning calls from Mom. I presented the evidence methodically, without emotion. The fake texts, the financial records, The witness accounts of Mom's public behaviors. Catherine shared similar experiences from decades earlier. James described Mom's meltdown at their apartment. Dad sat silent throughout most of the presentation, his face growing increasingly gray as the evidence mounted. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I knew some of it," he admitted. "Not the extent, but enough that I should have done something long ago." He looked at me with eyes full of regret. "I chose peace over protecting you." "I'm so sorry, Lisa." Mom arrived last, having been told this was a wedding budget discussion. Her confident entrance faltered when she saw the assembled group and the evidence spread across the coffee table. "What is this?" she demanded, eyes darting between faces. "A chance for truth," I said simply. What followed was both predictable and painful. Initial denial. Accusations of conspiracy against her. Attempts to win allies through familiar manipulation tactics. When those failed, rage, cold and cutting, then hot and uncontrolled. And finally, when cornered by irrefutable evidence, tears and claims of misunderstanding, of only wanting what was best for the family. "I will not be treated this way," she declared when everyone remained unmoved by her performance. "After everything I've done for this family, for Rebecca's wedding—" "About the wedding," Rebecca interrupted, standing to face our mother directly. "Lisa will be my maid of honor, as I always wanted. If you can't accept that and behave respectfully toward her, then you will have a severely limited role in both the wedding and our lives going forward." Mom's face contorted with shock. "You would choose her over your own mother?" "I'm choosing truth over manipulation," Rebecca replied steadily. "I'm choosing health over toxicity." "Your father will never allow this." Mom turned to Dad, expectation clear in her expression. For perhaps the first time in their marriage, Dad didn't yield to keep the peace. "Deborah, enough. Look at what you've done. Look at the evidence. This stops now." The intervention didn't end with a neat resolution. Mom left in a fury, promising consequences for our betrayal. But something fundamental had shifted. The pattern of manipulation had been exposed, named, and rejected by those it was designed to control. As difficult family members and wedding dynamics go, we were far from the finish line. But for the first time, I felt we were all walking in the same direction, toward truth and healthier relationships, regardless of what that might mean for the wedding now just weeks away. The week before Rebecca's wedding arrived with a tentative new normal establishing itself within our fractured family. After the intervention, Mom had cycled through various tactics: icy silence, tearful pleas for understanding, rage-filled accusations, and finally, a grudging outward acceptance of the new boundaries we'd established. Dad had surprised us all by standing firm in his support of Rebecca's decision to reinstate me as maid of honor. After decades of choosing peace over confrontation, he seemed to have found a reserve of strength none of us knew he possessed. "I should have protected you both long ago," he told me during a private conversation on my apartment balcony, city lights twinkling below us. "I convinced myself that saying nothing was the same as keeping the peace. I was wrong." "Why now, Dad?" I asked gently. "What changed?" He stared into his coffee cup for a long moment. Seeing it all laid out like that, the deliberate nature of it, I couldn't hide from it anymore. And honestly, Lisa, I'm tired. Tired of walking on eggshells, tired of pretending everything is fine when it isn't. His vulnerability was both shocking and healing. This new version of my father, willing to acknowledge hard truths, to apologize, to change, gave me hope that genuine transformation might be possible. Rebecca and I had been rebuilding our relationship day by day, our bond bruised but not broken. We'd spent long hours talking through the manipulations that had driven us apart, grieving the months of sisterhood we'd lost. I keep thinking about what would have happened if James hadn't discovered those fake texts, she said during one of our reconciliation brunches, restored to their rightful place in our weekly routines. Let's not think about that, I suggested, squeezing her hand across the table. We're here now. As for Mom, the family had presented her with clear conditions. She could participate in the wedding, but her role would be significantly restricted. No more unilateral decisions, no private conversations with vendors, no attempts to isolate or manipulate any family members. And if I refuse these conditions? She'd asked, the word dripping with disdain. Then you'll attend as a guest only, with no input on any elements of the ceremony or reception, Rebecca had stated firmly. To everyone's surprise, Mom had eventually agreed, though her compliance seemed more strategic than genuine. The flashes of resentment in her eyes, quickly masked by artificial pleasantness, told the true story. My own journey through this ordeal had been transformative in unexpected ways. The initial devastation had given way to clarity about family dynamics I'd normalized for too long. Working with a therapist specializing in family trauma, I'd begun to recognize patterns of enabling and people-pleasing in my own behavior that had made me vulnerable to manipulation. Your worth isn't measured by what you provide to others, Dr. Marshall reminded me during a particularly difficult session. Not financially, not emotionally, not practically. These words became a mantra as wedding preparations entered their final phase. I reinstated my role as maid of honor with a newfound sense of boundaries. Yes, I would help coordinate the bridesmaids and assist Rebecca with last-minute details. No, I would not deplete my savings or sacrifice my well-being to manage everyone else's emotions. I'd also rebooked a modified version of the honeymoon package for Rebecca and James, still generous, but scaled to reflect my new understanding of healthy giving. This is a gift freely given, with no strings attached, I told them when presenting the revised itinerary. Not a payment for inclusion or affection. The wedding day itself arrived sunny and clear, a beautiful contrast to the emotional storms of previous months. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m. at the Clayton Hotel, leaving the morning and early afternoon for preparations. Mom maintained her promised behavior, though the effort visibly strained her. Her interactions with me were minimal, but outwardly polite. Her attention focused on playing the role of mother of the bride perfectly for the gathering guests. As I helped Rebecca into her wedding dress, the one I hadn't been present to see her choose, I felt a momentary pang of loss for the uncomplicated joy this day should have held. Rebecca caught my expression in the mirror. I wish we could erase the last few months, she said softly. I don't, I surprised myself by responding. As painful as it was, it brought truth into the open. We can build something healthier now. She turned to face me, radiant in ivory lace. When did my big sister get so wise? Probably around the time my little sister got so brave, I replied, carefully adjusting her veil. The ceremony proceeded beautifully. I stood proudly beside Rebecca, holding her bouquet as she and James exchanged vows full of authentic emotion. Mom sat in the front row beside Dad, her composure perfect, her eyes occasionally meeting mine with unreadable emotion. It was during the reception that the most unexpected moment of healing occurred. As guests mingled during cocktail hour, I found myself momentarily alone near the gift table, adjusting some displaced cards. The calligraphy is beautiful, Mom's voice came from behind me. That was your doing, wasn't it? I turned, braced for criticism disguised as a compliment, but her expression held something I rarely saw directed at me. Genuine appreciation. Yes, I answered simply. Rebecca mentioned loving hand lettering, so... Mom nodded, an uncomfortable silence stretching between us. Finally, she spoke again, her voice lower, less certain. You've always noticed those details about people. What they love, what matters to them. I never had that gift. The admission, so small yet so significant coming from her, left me momentarily speechless. The therapist Catherine recommended, Mom continued, looking anywhere but at me, says I need to practice acknowledging others' strengths without feeling diminished by them. A brief, humorless laugh. Apparently I have work to do in that area. You're seeing a therapist? I couldn't keep the surprise from my voice. Your father insisted. After everything? She trailed off, then squared her shoulders. I don't expect this to fix things between us. I know that will take time, if it's even possible. But I am trying. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a transformation. But it was a tiny crack in the fortress of denial she'd built around herself. And for today, that was enough. 1 month after the wedding, our family began tentative group therapy sessions. Mom attended reluctantly at first, then with increasing willingness as the framework gave her acceptable ways to express her needs without manipulation. Dad found his voice gradually, speaking truths long suppressed. Rebecca and I strengthened. Our sisterhood, now built on mutual respect rather than codependent patterns. My own healing journey continued independently as well. I established clearer boundaries in all relationships, not just with family. I learned to recognize when my helping veered into unhealthy territory. And most importantly, I began to value myself apart from what I could provide or do for others. Tyler had been my rock throughout the entire ordeal, his steadfast support never wavering. 6 months after Rebecca's wedding, during a weekend hike, to our favorite mountain overlook, he proposed. Yes, I said without hesitation. But with one condition. He raised an eyebrow, waiting. Our wedding planning stays between us. Small committee, clear boundaries, no drama. His laughter echoed across the valley below us. Deal. Life continued to evolve in the years that followed. Mom's progress came in fits and starts, some days showing genuine growth, others falling back into old patterns. Dad discovered a newfound confidence that revitalized not just his marriage, but his long-deferred personal interests. Rebecca and James welcomed their first child, making me an aunt to a little girl whose middle name, Lisa, brought tears to my eyes. And I learned perhaps the most valuable lesson of all, that forgiveness doesn't require forgetting, that boundaries aren't barriers to love but foundations for its healthiest expression, and that standing firm in your own worth is not selfish but essential. The journey from that devastating night when my mother said those cruel words, "We all agreed you're not welcome at the wedding," to where I stand now wasn't direct or easy. It required courage to face painful truths, wisdom to distinguish healthy relationships from toxic ones, and strength to demand the respect I deserved. If you're facing similar family challenges or painful exclusions, remember that sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones that ultimately lead to healing. Your worth isn't determined by others' ability to recognize it, and sometimes, when the door to reconciliation seems firmly closed, it's actually the first step toward opening a healthier one. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to stand up to family manipulation or set difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you find the courage to value yourself when others couldn't see your worth? Drop a comment below, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if this story resonated with you. Your support means everything as we navigate these complicated human experiences together. Thank you for listening, and remember, your story matters too.